To the talk, I just want to reiterate what we were talking about before. Happy Father's Day. Happy Father's Day to all of our fathers. Happy Father's Day to everyone who is a father. And we celebrate this day, this concept of fatherhood, this idea of divine fatherhood. We need to talk about that in just a second. And of course, we realize today that it's a bittersweet day for many people, because some are dealing with the fact that their fathers are no longer with them. Their fathers have already passed on. And it's the memories of Father's Day and father growing up with their fathers and then losing their fathers. It's a very sad time for them. We need to be sensitive to that. We need to be aware of that. And others may not have known their father, or others may have not had a pleasant experience with their father. And we need to be aware of that and sensitive to that as well. And what I want to do right now is to kind of think about this spiritual concept of fatherhood. And it's kind of a difficult one for us in our culture, because the majority of the religion that comes to us in our culture comes to us from the Middle East, which was a male-dominated society. And so if you study world religions, you realize that there were goddess religions where the god figure was feminine, and these tended to be the religion of the people who tended the soil, the farmers, the ones who raised the animals, the ones who grew the crops, the people who were in true harmony with nature, and they can sense and see the oneness of life, and to them, the divine principle was more of a feminine principle, a nurturing principle, a caring principle. And then you had the hunter-gatherers who basically the nomads who went around and took what they wanted. They raided, they pillaged, they plundered, they stole. They were warlike, and they tended to think of their god as a male god who gave them permission to do these things. And if you read the Old Testament, you'll see that in there. So this concept then of God being a male has come down to us because of where the majority of our religions come to us from. But we know that that can't be true. God cannot be either male nor female, but both. Both the characteristics of both, whatever male and female is, the characteristics of both what fatherhood and what motherhood is. That is what the divine must be all, everything. But in the teachings, in the way that the teachings come down to us, what I'd like to focus on today, what I'd like people to be thinking about today, is that in this spiritual concept of fatherhood, or as Dr. Holmes might say, the male principle, he's talking about will and volition and choice. That in nature it is the male that sows the seed, and it is the female that receives the seed and nurtures it and has it grow. And in his teaching, then, that kind of becomes our ability to choose through will and volition, and then the working of the law. The working of the law. The law takes whatever it is that will and volition choose, and the law nurtures it. So when we're thinking about religion, when we're thinking about God the Father, what I invite you to be thinking about is choosing, deciding, will, volition, and that applies to everyone. That applies to all of us. We all have that ability, and we all have that responsibility, and we all are required to choose. And that's what we're going to talk about today. So the quote that Wendy read in the opening about we get to choose what happy is. We get to choose what our life is, because we have that principle of will and volition and choosing within us. So the ideas today kind of kept coming at me several different ways during the week. It's kind of interesting how things just kind of unfold, and they keep keep getting almost slapped in the forehead with these ideas that just kind of keep reinforcing and keep repeating them. And I just wanted to share with you what's been coming to me this week, what kept coming up this week. So the title of today's talk is Yes, Yes, Turn That Dial. And it's kind of a play on words for those of us who grew up when TV sets actually had dials on them. You know, you had to turn the dial to change the tuner of the TV to a different station. And of course, most of us, when we were growing up, we were the remote control of the house. You know, it was before remote controls were affordable and popular. And our parents would say, go over there and change it to the other channel, you know. And there was only a few channels that were broadcasting. Even growing up in New York City, you know, we had the 3 major networks and maybe 1 or 2 independent stations that we had to watch, you know, and that was it. And of course, TVs went off the air about midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning. They played the Star Spangled Banner, and then you just got the test pattern that came up, you know. But the old time broadcasters, and some even today, you know, when they were going to a commercial break, they would say, now we're going to have to take a little break here to pay our bills, but don't touch that dial. We'll be right back. You see, and they were trying to hook the viewer into staying tuned to their program, to whatever message it was that they wanted to give to us, you know. Because if we turned the dial, if we went to another station, of course, they lost viewers. And we have to remember that the purpose of the broadcast TV is, we think it's to deliver programming to us, but we have to flip that around and realize that what the purpose of it is to deliver us to the advertisers. It is to deliver a groomed viewing audience to the advertisers, so the advertisers know if they run an ad during a certain program during a certain time slot, that the viewing audience, they know the demographics of that viewing audience, and they want that audience held captive in order to deliver their commercials to them. So it's very, very important to them as business people that they hold our attention. Don't turn that dial. Don't touch that dial. And of course, what happens is if you don't turn the dial, if you don't touch the dial, you keep getting the same old programming over and over and over again. And today, you know, in today's environment, of course, we don't have dials anymore. We have push-button remotes and those things. But if you watch the broadcasters, particularly the news programs, maybe the live programs, they keep trying to tease you into coming back, into staying tuned, you know. Very frequently, just before they go to a commercial, whoever does the weather will come on and say, is it going to rain tonight? If so, where? If so, how much? I'll tell you all that when we come back. And they're doing that to keep you from turning the dial, keep you from turning the dial. So this idea then of we have the ability to choose, we have the ability to change to a different station, we have the ability to listen to a different message, but we have to exercise that will, we have to exercise that volition. We have to make a conscious choice to break away from the old programming. The second thing that came up that kind of reinforced it was I was watching a YouTube video, and it was, you know, one of my favorite subjects that I entirely don't understand at all. But they were talking about quantum mechanics and how scientists are now starting to consider the fact that even some very basic things such as our senses involve our body's ability to interact with particles at the quantum level, not just at the nuclear level, but at the subatomic level, not just at the atomic level, but at the subatomic level. So the example that they were giving was, one of the examples that they were giving was our sense of smell. And for many years, the prevailing theory about how our sense of smell works is that the olfactory senses in our nose have a particular shape. Each one has a particular shape. And think of it as a jigsaw puzzle. And the molecules that we smell, the molecules in the air, they also have a particular shape. And and as life has designed it, then these molecules find a sensor in our nose that they exactly fit in. So think of taking two pieces of a jigsaw puzzle and putting them together, and they exactly snap together, you know. So things that smell sweet have one shape, and they fit into a receptor that matches. And when that receptor is activated, our consciousness interprets new words, interprets it as sweet, right? Or sour, or oranges, or grapes, or all these different things. So that was kind of the prevailing idea. We have certain receptors that are kind of like the tuner on our TV. They are attuned to receive a certain smell. Now, the other interesting thing about what I was watching is that somebody said, well, suppose we try to fool the senses. Suppose we make a molecule that smells one way, but we change its shape to make it fit a different receptor. Will the people be able to tell the difference, or will it still smell like it should smell according to the shape of the molecule? And what they found is that even though they could create, and I don't understand at all how they were able to do it, but they created molecules that were shaped the same, for example, the same as the smell of oranges, but they smelled entirely different than oranges, whatever it was. And when they had people smell them, people were able to correctly identify the smell. They didn't smell like oranges; they smelled like whatever else they made them. So even though it fit, even though it found a receptor, and even though it got plugged in, there was still something there that had the ability to discern. There was still something there that had the ability to discern. But it started with the receptors being attuned to take whatever that shape was, to receive it. Then the third thing, our Wednesday night group, we were listening to a podcast, and it was an interview with a doctor. I don't know if it was a doctor of psychology or a doctor of psychiatry, but this gentleman has studied meditation for many years, and studied the effects of meditation on the brain. So the drift of the interview was that the brain, as can be measured with instruments, and behavior, as can be measured by observation, of people who meditate on a regular basis is different. It's different than people who don't meditate. It's different. And one of the interesting examples they gave, I'm still kind of thinking about this. It was kind of really interesting to me. Is the doctor gave an example that they come up with a way, an experiment that can cause people to feel pain, but in a way that doesn't harm them, using heat. I don't know how they did that, but they have a way of using heat to create the sensation of pain, but without physically damaging people. And they told the subjects in the experiment, they told them, now we're gonna ring a bell. You're gonna hear a tone, and then 10 seconds later, you're gonna feel the pain. And that's what they told them. And what happened with the people who don't meditate is as soon as the tone sounded, as soon as the bell rang, the area of the brain that senses pain began to become very active. And then the actual stimulus of pain was applied. And that part of the brain kept active. And then the stimulus for pain was removed, but that area of the brain remained active for some time after. And then they did the same thing with he called them master meditators. And what they found in the master meditators is when they played the tone, that area of the brain that deals with pain was not active. And it wasn't until the actual stimulus for pain was applied that that area of the brain became active. And as soon as the stimulus for pain was removed, that area went back to normal. So the people who were not meditators, we can imagine that they were suffering anxiety, or you can imagine if you were sitting there, you'd be thinking, oh, this is going to hurt. And then afterwards, they might be dealing with regret or remorse. Why did I sign up for this experiment? Oh man, that still hurts. But the people who meditated, their brain was only active while the pain was really there, and it was more so active. They felt the pain at a different level. They were more sensitive to it than the other people. So to me, what that is telling us is then that somehow the attunement to the emotions of worry and regret, somehow it was different. Somehow it was different because these people had engaged in meditation. Now, the last point I want to bring up as kind of setting up these examples, the last point I want to bring up is that in this discussion, the doctor was talking about how in today's society we are on information overload. We get information beamed to us all different ways, and if you watch like news on TV, they've got the people who are talking, and then they've got a crawl going across the bottom, and then they've got another box up in the corner blinking, and they've got all of these different things going on all at the same time. It's like they can't try enough different ways to keep that information coming to us and to keep us from turning the dial. Keep us from turning the dial. Oh, I missed that bit of information as it went by the crawl. I need to stay tuned until it comes back around, And of course, it may be another day or two before it comes back around. And they know what they're doing. They're practiced at what they're doing. So the doctor said that with all of these different things coming at us, that what people who want us to pay attention to their information have learned to do is they have learned to use fear as a way of getting us to pay attention. I mean, if you've ever been driving a car and you've got the radio on, all of a sudden you hear sirens and you start looking in your mirrors to see if there's an emergency vehicle coming up behind you. Do you need to pull over to the right and all these things? And then you realize that the siren is a commercial on the radio. Right? This is the kind of thing I'm talking about. Or the scary headlines, the world is going to end, or we're going to war, and all these things that are constantly coming at us. So the interviewer at that point said, I need to inject something here. He said, my first career was as a political journalist. He says, and there's so many different ways for people to get information. There's so many different social media platforms. There's so many different channels out there that we had to make our headlines and our leads outrageous in order to get people's attention, in order to get them to open themselves up to the information that we wanted to give to them. And the doctor's answer was fantastic. The doctor said, well, he said, love, the emotion of love opens us up. He says, but nobody's figured out how to use it to economies of scale. So they resort to fear. So where all this is going is if you think about the tuner in a TV set or a radio receiver, and when we used to have the old dials that we used to turn, what is happening is all of these messages in the airways, whether they be TV stations or radio stations or police radio, fire departments, ambulances, avionics, navigational systems that are broadcasting, even simple things like your traffic signals. There might be radio waves used to control your traffic signals. all of these different things, they are all in the air right here, right now. They're all taking place simultaneously. But we have to choose which of those to accept, and in accepting that one station that we choose to tune to, we have tuned out, we have excluded, we have ignored all of the rest. All of the rest. The choice is up to us. The choice is up to us. So in his essay, You Are a Spiritual Broadcasting Station, and if you have Dr. Holmes' book, his little book, Living the Science of Mind, which is a companion to a home study course that he wrote, excellent book, I highly recommend it. He wrote this essay called You Are a Spiritual Broadcasting Station. And he uses some of these same analogies that we're using today. You and I have a choice. You and I have a choice. Now, when I was an electronics technician a long time ago, we had special tools for tuning the coils in a receiver, to adjust them so that they would perfectly receive whatever station it was that we were supposed to be receiving. We used to call it tweaking. We would go in there and somebody would say, "Give me the tweaker," and it was a special tool. It was made out of plastic. So if it had been metal and we tried to tune a live circuit while there was metal near there, the metal would affect it. So we had this plastic. We had this little piece of plastic that we put down inside a coil, and we would turn it ever so slightly while we looked at a waveform on a scope until we got that receiver tuned properly. So what is happening is the radio signals, the TV signals, they're all coming through the air, and they're all coming at a different frequency. And at the transmitter, in the transmitter circuit, there is a similar tuned circuit, an oscillator circuit. And each station emits in a very narrowly defined band. And each receiving station has to be attuned to receive that. And what we want to consider then is that our consciousness, the things that we dwell on, the things that we react to, the things that we accept into our lives, reflect our attunement. They reflect the station that we have our consciousness attuned to. So we know that race consciousness, the consciousness of the human race, or the collective unconscious, as Carl Jung called it, we know that fear is prevalent. We know that, the first chakra, survival. We know that messages that evoke fear, messages that seem important to survival, they somehow get through for that very reason, Something seems dangerous and our ears perk up. There's an interesting book called Virus of the Mind is what it's called. The name escaped me for a minute. And I think Richard Brody was the author. And he did a study as to why these junk messages, the junk memes and the junk emails get through, And before there was Facebook and we only had email, you would get these emails and say, "Please pass this on to everybody, this is dangerous, and tell people this, tell people that." And people would just forward it and never stop to ask and never stop to consider, is this even real? Is this even true? And what Brody was saying is because if it possibly were true and we didn't pass it on, we would feel terrible. We want to feel like we're helping our friends and our family by warning them of potential danger. So the people who want to manipulate us, the people who want us to stay tuned to their messages, they constantly beat this drum of fear and of worry and of negativity and of doubt. And that is where race consciousness is. And what we want to recognize then, as spiritual beings who are interested in our spiritual growth, we're going to have to change the channel. If we're caught up in any of that, if any of that strikes a chord with us, if the fear messages cause a reaction in us, any of those things, we have to say, wait a minute. What that means is that I'm still tuned to the old channel. I'm still tuned to the old way. Now, I'm not saying that we ignore danger. I'm not saying if you drive down the road and there really is a police car or a fire engine behind you, you don't pull over to the side. But what I'm saying is you become more discerning. Just like the example where they could change the shape of the molecule and it would fit into a different receptor in your nose. Your nose or your consciousness or whatever it does, the discernment, knew the difference. Well, this feels like a molecule that might be an orange, but it's really something pretending to be an orange. So we have the ability to discern. We have the ability that if something comes up, we can look at that and say, first of all, did I resonate with it? If I did, do I want to resonate with that? Do I want to vibrate with that? If you want to think. So resonance, simply two things that are in sympathy, vibrate in sympathy. If you have two pianos in a room and they're tuned the same way, and you go over and you hit middle C on one, the string that plays middle C on the other will start to vibrate. Right? They're in resonance. They vibrate at the same resonant frequency. So what we start to realize as we grow spiritually is, just as I cannot recognize beauty out there if there wasn't first beauty within me, I cannot be moved by fear unless fear is first within me. And now we start to move into what the meditation might be doing, how we might be growing. Probably the first question is what is it that you want? What is it that you want to respond to? What is it that you want to be attuned to? See, so in our spiritual growth, we say, well, I want to be attuned with God. Rocco Errico, who did, still does, as far as I know, I think he's down in Atlanta now. He does a lot of work in helping to interpret the Aramaic meaning of scriptures. You know, as we take things from one language and one culture and we try to translate it several times into another, the way things are being interpreted today are not necessarily the way that they were meant 2,000 years ago. And his life's work seems to be about that, about helping us to go back and understand what these things meant to the people for whom they were written 2,000 years ago. And he says the Aramaic word for prayer is more akin to the word for attunement. And he wrote a little book called Setting a Trap for God, in which he analyzes the Our Father, and he goes through it, and he says the Our Father consists of 8 spiritual attunements. And what the attunements are is we are not trying to get God to do anything. We're not trying to beg God or beseech God or coerce God to do anything. But what we are doing is we are attuning our consciousness to receive that which has already been given. Right? In the scripture it tells us the gifts have already been given. But ask, believing, and you shall receive them. Well, why do we have to ask? Why do we have to ask if they've already been given? If the Father in heaven knows what we need before we ask, why do we still have to ask? And to me, the answer is we have to attune our consciousness to receive that which has already been given. So just like the airwaves are filled with many different TV stations now, many different radio stations now, and we get to choose which one to listen to, but we have to make that choice. We have to choose to tune in to the peace. We have to choose to tune in to the love. We have to choose to tune in to the joy. So just a couple things that we want to consider then. The first one is, well, if fear is the predominant emotion, the predominant modus operandi of the culture in which we live, and we don't want to respond to that, what is the quickest way? What is the quickest way to retune our receivers, retune the receivers of our consciousness to that? And the answer is the one that the doctor gave us. He said, it's love. It's love. It's love. The Bible tells us if you don't know God, you don't know love. And if you have fear, you don't know love, and you don't know God. It's just that simple. What is fear? It is the absence of love. It is the absence of love. So if we can find a way, to retune our consciousness to love, a practice, a spiritual practice, of which meditation is a good one, There are meditations on love. There are meditations on compassion. There are meditations on loving kindness. And as we start to, through our spiritual practice, through our education, through our reading, through our listening, through our growth, as we start to realize that we are one with everything. We are one with everything. Divine love has created us out of itself in its image and likeness, and we are not separated from or different than. We are part of it. But we are awakening to that. We are awakening to that fact, and we have free will. And we have not always chosen to believe that. We have not always chosen to act in accord with that. We believe the things that the world is telling us. We believe when people say, stay tuned because there's more to worry about and we need you to worry with us. We stay tuned. And it's time to change that channel. It's time, yes, turn that dial. It's time to get away from the stream of gibberish that comes to us from race consciousness and fear, which results in anger. And what we want to do is we want to turn to love. Now, in his essay on a spiritual broadcasting station, Dr. Holmes tells us, he says, you're not only a receiving unit, but you're a broadcasting unit. And I've actually seen diagrams from different metaphysical teachings where they have this drawing of the brain and the spine, and they have all these illustrations to demonstrate in whatever the ideas of that teaching are, that our physiology is a perfect receiving and broadcasting station. Now, I don't know if the drawing about our physiology is correct. But I do know that we are a broadcasting station. What you are giving out, you are getting back, you see. As Florence Scovel Shinn says, right, life's a game of boomerangs. As the Bible says, cast your bread upon the waters, and it shall not return unto you void. Right? It'll come back to you. I'm sorry. Your word shall not return unto you void. Cast your bread upon the waters, and it will return to you. What we're giving out is what we are getting back. If we are getting back fear, we're giving out fear. If we are getting back anger, we are giving out anger. If we are getting back love, we are giving out love. So the simplest way to be aware of what we are attuned to and to change our attunement is by paying attention to what we're paying attention to, by paying attention to what we're giving out. And we can make this an active practice. We can make this an active daily practice. Okay? I've been talking about attention for several weeks now. Pay attention to your intentions. What are you paying attention to? What kind of a day did you choose to have this morning when you got up? What kind of a day do you choose to have this afternoon after we finish this service? How do you want to let love express as you and through you today? So we can deliberately choose love over hate. We can deliberately choose love over fear. Love is the experience of unity. Love is the experience of oneness. Our spiritual growth is growing in awareness and the experience of that unity and of that oneness. Dr. Holmes tells us all of our problems come from a sense of separation, a false belief that separation is real. And all of our spiritual practice then is for the purpose of retuning our consciousness to eliminate these ideas of separation. So the one spiritual practice that we have that we can do 24/7, or at least while we're awake, if we haven't learned how to be lucid in our sleep, is we can see the love in everything. We can see the oneness in everything. We can see the unity in everything. It's a beautiful day. The sun is shining. The wind is blowing. We had plenty of rain last week. The lawn is greening up again. Something within the grass, something within the water, something within the soil, something knows how to work together in perfect harmony in order for life to flourish. Can we see the beauty of the day in the children's smiles as they give Daddy his card? Can we see and feel the love in the Father's smile as he acknowledges the love of his children? Can we feel the love in our own hearts as we think about our own fathers or those who have fulfilled that role of fatherhood in our lives, you see? When we go to the grocery store, can we just kind of for a minute just connect with everybody who had something to do with that food getting to our table? The farmers who grew it, the people who picked it, those who process it in the houses, those who trucked it, those who unloaded it, those who stocked it on the shelves. And if we start to think about all of those people, and we start to think about their parents and their families, and we think about all who had influence on them, we start to realize our connection to the world. No one is an island, right? No one is an island. So as we attune ourselves to love, as we attune ourselves to consciously give out love, to broadcast love, to transmit love, to see love, it's only natural that we start to receive more love. We start to become more aware of it without having to poke ourselves with a stick to see it. The second thing that we can do is as the podcast was talking, is we can take up the practice of meditation. Because the meditation does, in fact, produce the changes that we're talking about. We can take up contemplative meditation, where we meditate on compassion, where we meditate on love, where we meditate on our unity and our oneness, where we meditate on the goodness of God. We use spiritual mind treatment for the purpose of setting our intentions for the day and during the day. Recognizing that God already is love. God already is joy. God already is kindness. And God has created me out of itself as its instrument of love and of joy and of kindness. And today I go forward and express that love. I express that joy. I express that kindness, and I reject everything unlike it. I've got my tuner set to love, and everything unlike love can't even enter my consciousness. I am no longer hooked by the fear-mongering headlines. I see only God's love. I see only God's love. So in the spiritual respect of will and volition and of choosing, we are all the fathers of our lives. We all must choose. We all must decide. We all must select. We are a spiritual broadcasting station and a spiritual receiving station. We can leave ourselves on the old channels and get more of the old stuff, or we can turn the dial. We can turn the dial to love. We can turn the dial to compassion. We can turn the dial to gratitude, which is recognizing the presence and the activity and the goodness of God in every moment of every day. But the choice is ours. We have to make that choice. In the book of Genesis, we are given the metaphor of Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. And they decided to choose to eat from the knowledge of good and the knowledge of evil. Now, mind you that the knowledge of something is not the thing itself. And because we know something doesn't mean it's real. It means we believe it, but it doesn't mean it's real. But there's another tree in the garden, and that's the tree of life. And in the Old Testament, we are given the image of the two cherubim standing at the Garden of Eden, preventing mankind from getting back to that tree of life. And in Buddhism, we have a similar imagery. We have the Buddha in a cave meditating, and the Buddha has his hand out, kind of like a crossing guard might put their hand out to stop the traffic from coming. And in front of the cave, similar to the two cherubim at the Garden of Eden, there's these two ugly characters. And what Joseph Campbell tells us is that the symbolism in Buddhism is that the two ugly characters that are keeping us out of the peace and the serenity of the garden are fear and our desires. Fear and desires. And the hand up in the crossing guard stop format, in that position with the palm out. That's telling us, pay no attention to those things. Pay no attention to these two ugly characters. They are not real. Come meditate with me. Come sit in the peace. Come sit in the love. Fear is something that evolved and kept us alive through evolution. And it has its place, but its place is way overused. It's time to switch off the channel. It's time to switch to love. As we grow spiritually, the fear, the irrational fear, the unfounded fear subsides. Our ego desires subside. Our desire then becomes for the true happiness of all sentient beings. Our ideas of separation go away, and we start to experience the oneness. We have arrived back at the tree of life. So I invite you to join me this week. Pay attention to what you're paying attention to. What gets your attention? What gets you riled up? What gets you going? What are you putting out? What are you deliberately choosing to put out? And if you're not deliberately choosing to put something out, you are subconsciously choosing to put out the same old, same old, same old. So you have to change the channel. You've got to turn the dial for what you're broadcasting. And that changes the dial for what you're receiving. Your spiritual growth requires conscious cooperation. You have to turn the dial. And so it is. And the closing treatment today is one that Dr. Holmes himself wrote at the end of this essay on You Are a Spiritual Broadcasting Station. We're going to close with Dr. Holmes' own treatment today. Out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaketh. Today I am keeping careful watch that I think and speak only those things that I wish broadcast from my mind and returned to me. I desire that everything I think shall be from the heart as well as from the head. I wish to broadcast kindness and love, sympathy and understanding, peace and joy. No condemnation, judgment, or fear shall go from me to anyone or anything. Turning my mind into the divine, I draw into my own soul the essence of everything that is good, true, and beautiful. I draw into my own mind the realization of the divine presence and the power of good until my whole being responds. And this is all I wish to broadcast to the world. Something that will help, heal, and bless. Something that will cause everyone to feel a new strength, a new hope. Desiring to receive the divine blessing in my own life, I wish to broadcast it to the whole world. And so I would say to the whole world, the Lord bless and keep thee. The Lord make his face to shine upon thee, and be gracious unto thee. The Lord lift up his countenance upon thee, and give thee peace, both now and forevermore. Amen. And so it is. That's